Okay, so every time you're online, every single time you use an app or a website, there are these invisible systems working behind the scenes. They're like these unseen bouncers standing between you and a whole world of trouble. Today, we're going to pull back that curtain and talk about these digital guardrails, these safety patterns that are constantly, tirelessly keeping things safe for all of us. So, have you ever actually wondered what happens right after you hit send on a message or, a comment? You type something into a search bar, a chat window, whatever. You click that button. What's going on in that tiny little split second before it actually appears? Well, it turns out there's a ton happening that you probably never even thought about. You see, every single one of those text boxes, it's basically a doorway straight into the heart of a system. And, well, just like with any doorway, not all the visitors who want to come through are friendly. In fact, some are downright malicious. And this right here is the core problem that literally every single online service has to figure out how to solve. So how do they do it? How do you guard that doorway? Well, they build something called a digital guardrail. You can think of it as the very first line of defense. It's this automated system, this invisible protector that's there for both you and for the platform itself. Okay, so what is it, really? At its absolute core, a guardrail is a system that checks all user inputs, everything you type, for potential threats before they get processed. And that word before is absolutely crucial here. This whole thing is about prevention. It's about stopping trouble at the front door, not trying to clean up a huge mess later on. Honestly, the best way to think about this is like a bouncer at a nightclub, right? Your data, your comment, it walks up to the door, and this digital bouncer is standing there. It's checking your ID, it's deciding if you look trustworthy, if you're on the guest list, and most importantly, if you look like you're going to start a fight inside. Only if you pass that check do you get past the velvet rope. So, what's this bouncer actually looking for? How does it make that call on who gets in and who gets kicked to the curb? All right, let's take a look inside the checkpoint and break down how this whole system really works. Okay, so the system is on the lookout for a few main things. First up, the obvious one, harmful content. Stuff like hate speech, threats, that kind of thing. Second, it's hunting for what's called personally identifiable information, or PII. This is the super sensitive stuff you never want to accidentally share. Think social security numbers, credit card info. And third, it's watching out for something called injection attacks. It's a bit technical, but it's basically when a bad actor tries to sneak malicious code into a text box, hoping to trick the whole system into running it. Very nasty stuff. And this whole security check happens in a blink of an eye, really. It's a simple four-step process. 1, the system gets your input. 2, it's immediately scanned for all those threats we just talked about. 3, it classifies the risk level. Is this a big deal or not? And finally, step 4, based on that risk level, it takes action. And that classification step is where the magic really happens. If the risk is low, it's like, yep, you're good, and your message sails right on through. No problem. If the risk is medium, the system kind of goes, okay, we'll let this in, but we're going to flag it and keep an eye on it. But if that risk level is high, whoa, the system slams on the brakes. It'll either block the input right then and there, or it'll escalate it for a human to review. And that human review part is a super important concept. It's called human in the loop. Think about it. When the automated bouncer sees something that's really suspicious, or maybe just confusing, it doesn't have to make the final call on its own. Instead, it does what any good bouncer would do. It calls for the manager. A real person comes over to take a look and makes the final decision. Block it or let it in. But here's a really interesting twist. The check doesn't stop with what you type in. The system's own output is also moderated. It's a thing called output moderation, and it's all about making sure the system itself is safe and compliant. So, for example, an AI chatbot won't suddenly start spitting out harmful information. To go back to our metaphor, it's like the bouncer also has to make sure the club's own staff is behaving properly. Now, all of this sounds amazing in theory, right? But in the real world, there's a catch. There's this constant trade-off between safety and, well, just being plain annoying. Every single platform has to walk this tightrope, balancing security with not frustrating its users. And where will you find these guardrails? I mean, honestly, they are everywhere. We're talking public-facing websites, government applications, all that big enterprise software, even the customer service chatbot you might have just been talking to. The rule of thumb is pretty simple. If there's an open text box you can type in, you can pretty much guarantee there's a guardrail system standing watch. And this really gets us to the two sides of the coin here. The upside? Safety. These things mitigate huge risks. They make sure companies are compliant with the law, and they protect all of us from genuinely harmful stuff. But the downside? Oh, it can be so frustrating. A system that's too cautious can create what are called false positives, blocking your totally harmless comment. It adds friction to everything you do, and let's be honest, can just be super annoying. So it all comes down to this one question, right? Where do you draw the line? At what point does a helpful guardrail just become a really annoying gatekeeper? Finding that perfect sweet spot between freedom and safety, it's honestly one of the biggest and kind of hidden challenges in building this digital world we all spend so much time in. Something to think about.